wonderful. This is great. But this also reminds me, and Shar and I are kind of a normal couple. You'll learn more about that over the weekend. This reminds me of my first year in Fellowship Prairies, and I was speaking at our Pastors and Wives Retreat. I was in Toronto the day before. I flew into Calgary, and you know, all the suitcases are going past, and all the suitcases are going past, and all the suitcases are going past. The guy beside me, he says, WestJet has finally caught up with Air Canada. And I said, why? He says, you and I lost our luggage. I was brand new to the region, and I was a little bit concerned about doing the weekend in blue jeans. And so Shar had her stuff, and so we shared a toothbrush for the weekend. Interesting. However, let me tell you, Monday night of this week, and Shar is very wise. My niece is living with us while she goes to university. And so Shar wouldn't dare do this with just the two of us. But with Katie there, she says, so honey, we are going to do something and you're not going to argue, right? What do I do when my niece is there? I said, honey, I wouldn't argue with you. She says, no, listen clearly. We're going to have this discussion and we're going to do this and you're not going to argue, right? I said, honey, I won't argue. She says, good. You're speaking at this weekend retreat and you need new dress pants. So we went out and bought me new dress pants. Oops. Oh well. Sorry, hon. In the suitcase somewhere. You are wonderful. Shar and I, as I said, are kind of normal. We were doing a Friday evening and Saturday seminar a year ago, and we probably got the best compliment we've ever had. And halfway through the morning, coffee break time, this lady comes to me and says, "You're a normal couple." I said, "Yeah, why?" She says, "You bump into each other." I said, "Sorry, isn't that life?" And she says, "You know, when missionary couples come to our church, they look and act like perfect couples." She said, "I always drive home thinking, we have an awful marriage. We're just average." And she says, "Watching you two work together, you bump into each other and you're average." Honey, I think that was a compliment. And yeah, I think it is. In Bible college, one day I was listening in chapel and not looking at Shar, which was pretty rare. And the guest speaker in chapel, he says, "The only way to be in the Lord's will is to be in Africa." Whoa. Snakes don't like me. And I don't know why. I don't know what I've ever done to them. They just don't like me. And what did we do? Shar and I were in San Diego the first 2 weeks of December, and I love cactus. When we left one of our homes in northern Alberta, I gave away 110 cactus plants. It was wonderful, awful to give away. Our kids hate it, but I love them. Anyway, we're cactus all over the place, but I'm scared to get out of the car because I know snakes and don't like me. I don't. Anyway, Africa. So then the visiting minister, he says, "But you can be in the Lord's second best by doing something else." And I thought, I moved. You know, though I knew where Africa was, but the Lord and I had never talked about Africa. It was simply not in the plan that I knew about, and whoa, this was going to be a challenge. A couple of days later, I had the guts to go talk to one of my professors, and when he stopped laughing, he said, "Well, we heard him speak, and he won't be back." And I said, "Laurie, what do you think you're going to do?" I said, "Well, my oldest brother's a pastor, and my next brother is singing about being a pastor, so I think I'm going to the secular world." And he said, as teachers, professors, we're not allowed to gossip about students, but we do. And he says, "Laurie, when we talk about you," now watch this, he says, "we think you're going into the secular world and ministry later." And then he says, "Go back to your dorm." He was had enough of you by that time. "Go back to your dorm and read about Caleb." Now, Caleb was one of the spies who went into the promised land. And he came back excited, motivated, and he was, "Joshua, we're trying to convince the people, we need to go in and take over. It's wonderful, we can do it." He was so frustrated, he was tearing his clothes to try to convince the people. He didn't go into the promised land. Caleb was in his 80s. He goes to Joshua and he says, "I'm as strong today as I was when I was younger. Give me that mountain." 29 years later, after I graduated from Bible college, I went in and took my degree in psychology. 29 years later, I'm Chief Executive Officer in Family and Social Services, Alberta Government, and I've got an $18 million budget. I don't have that problem now. I had 1,000 people look to my office for leadership, and my cell phone rings. And this pastor says, "Hi, I'm Pastor so-and-so. I'm president of the FEBCAST region. We'd like to know if you want to be our regional director." One, I was crying at that point, and my first thought was, I wonder if my apprenticeship is finally over. And I find that just fascinating, that a professor in Bible college was able to say something that led into my life in 29 years in the secular world, and regional director for FEBCAST, or we'll be changing our name to Fellowship Prairies real soon as the federal government stops irritating us, or vice versa, depending on how you want to go on that one. Yeah, so I've been regional director for Fellowship Prairies for 11 years. I love what I do. Remember the old phrase, if you find a job you love, you'll never have to work a day in your life. I love what I do. I work with pastors. When I explain to people who are not Christians what I do, I use the same phrase all the time. I laugh, I pray, and I cry with pastors and church leaders all day long and half my evenings, and that's what I do. And the hardest phone call is, "Hey Laurie, we need to talk." That could go either way. Sometimes it's, "Guess what the Lord has done?" I'm going to tell you 2 stories each time I talk to you, which will be short, sort of. About FEBCAST, I promised David and Rita I wouldn't tell you all the good things, but I will tell you some of them. The other challenge is when pastors say, "Hey Laurie, we need to talk." It's that other end of the scale. It's that other end of the scale because pastors are real life people. And flock, sheep, bite. Remember that. First lesson for the weekend, sheep bite. That was my call to ministry. Fascinating when you think the average pastor is not taught in seminary to balance a budget. The pastor in typical seminary is not taught to hire and fire. The pastor in a typical seminary is not taught to deal with conflict. I was explaining to someone one day that I do a little bit of conflict resolution, and this person who was not a Christian said, "I thought you said you worked for the church." I will tell you a little bit more tomorrow. Well, I'll tell you right now, then it's out of the way. Somebody said to me recently, "Why are you so good at dealing with conflict?" My brain said, because I've worked with churches for 11 years. Isn't that frightening? The amount of conflict. I'm going to give you 3 points Sunday morning, which I happen to love. So I'm going to tell you about Sunday morning. Tomorrow morning, I don't know, tomorrow sometime, we're talking about values. 2 rules. Ladies, you cannot use the elbow tomorrow. You cannot. Men, you cannot say, "I told you so." Ethics is the most fascinating conversation. We might even talk about Canadian senators. No, I won't go that far. We love our Canadian senators. Shar, tell us about our wonderful family. Yeah, come on up here. I have to review my notes. See what I'm talking about tonight.
I never know when he's going to do this to me, so I'll try and be brief. We have 3 grown children who are married, and best part is we have 9 grandchildren. And that's really the fun part for us. It's a great stage in life. And our 3 kids all live in Alberta, so we're quite blessed with that. The furthest away is about 3.5 hours, so we do get to see them often on. And our oldest granddaughter just is in her first year at Ambrose University, which is a Christian university in Calgary. And our second granddaughter is going very quickly next year. So it's just really, really fun. And our youngest guy is 2. So we have the whole gamut, as you can.
You guys want to see pictures?
No, that's good.
At all?
And I have this husband.
You have what?
I have this husband.
Besides you and I bumping into each other, what do you do outside the home?
I'm a church administrator.
What else do you do when you travel with me?
I get to know people, and I love that.
I happen to think the bottom line of what I do, I'm going to say primarily, and we do a lot of it together, is simply build relationships. If you can't build a relationship, the theory doesn't mean anything. It doesn't accomplish anything. You need to build relationships. I love Portugal, there you went. The concept of community. If you guys aren't working together, there's no way you can reach your community. The vision statement of Fellowship Prairies, healthy leaders leading healthy churches into the harvest. When I preach on it, I'm not going to this weekend. No, I always preach on it. I use it backwards. We're not going to get into the harvest until we have healthy churches. And we're not going to have healthy churches until we have healthy leaders. That seems so logical to me. It seems so critical to me. And when I work with elders, and I work with deacons, and I work with pastors, and I say, and I've seen some frightening things at annual meetings. Who wants to be on the elders board this year? I know Frank. Hey Frank, you're retired. And I have people say the most absurd thing. Well, what do you do? Well, we meet every third Thursday. Well, I couldn't do it on Wednesday because I got my favorite TV show. So yeah, I could sort of be an elder. And I think, Lord, help us. We need to deal with the relationship issue. We need to deal with the responsibility issue. And we need healthy leaders leading healthy churches into the harvest. Tomorrow morning we're going to talk a lot. And I need your help. But tonight I've got one question for you. And I do want some responses. So thank you. You're on a great roll with the snakes. Keep it up. What's your name?
Livia.
Livia. I learned a name. That's good. Livia. Thank you. Livia and snakes. Or lack of. That's right. Who were leaders in your lives? Give me 2 or 3 answers. Who were leaders to you? Peers, yes. Parents, did I hear that correctly? Okay. What else? Well, teachers, thank you. Are you a teacher? Oh, okay, good. Teachers, yes. Youth pastor, pastor. So notice the word youth pastor came up before. Anyway, I won't go there. Anyone else?
Coaches. Managers. Workers.
Managers, what?
Well, co-workers.
Co-workers?
Politicians.
What? Are you running for something?
Senators.
Senators, I love those guys. They make great illustrations. I have plenty, but not this weekend. Parents, teachers, friends, did they have a degree in leadership?
No.
Well, hold it. You've told me that they were leaders to you, but they didn't have a degree in leadership. They didn't go to school to be a leader. So how could they be a leader in your life? How come?
Influence.
Influence, yes. I like the phrase. I've been a Christian all my life. That isn't true, obviously. But I grew up in a Christian home. I have listened to thousands of sermons. Pardon. I have forgotten thousands of sermons. But I can tell you of 5 conversations that totally influenced my life. Barton spends 100 hours a week studying and preparing. I don't know. And watch pastors worry like crazy about the Word. And yes, that's important, and yes, you should. But I would look at my life, and when I look at others, I discover that influence. And you can't influence until you have a relationship. Therefore, each of you are leaders. When I was a teenager, Youth for Christ had a stat that each of us influence at least 150 people. Think that through. Dunbar Heights people. Sorry, I had to look. Think that one through. If in fact you truly influence 150 people, you are a leader and you have followers. Now, based on that, let's pray. Thank you, dear Lord, for a phenomenal opportunity to laugh, to talk, to tease, to irritate, to be with some really, really neat people. But dear Lord, I'm asking you to simply join us. find that spot in our hearts. Find that spot in our hearts that will help us be a little bit different on Monday because of laughing, talking, sharing, praying, and learning. Dear Lord, guide us and be with us. I need to tell you, okay, I'm going to walk. When I came into this role, it's top of my notes, but I forgot. When I came into this role, I thought everyone in this role, including pastors, had a prayer team. I thought that was just natural. So one of the first things we did was find 5 couples who pray for us. I reallocated them this week. Sent them an email on Thursday, and I said, I'm going to BC. I have no idea where I'm going. We're going to be speaking at a retreat. Therefore, I want each of you to pray for the people you haven't met. There are 5 couples this weekend who I guarantee you will be spending an hour in prayer for you. Let me give you one more example before I go back to my notes. As you can imagine, I deal with some interesting challenges. I was in Calgary a couple of years ago, and I don't know where to stand to see everybody. Some of you disappeared. So in Calgary, dealing with a difficult day. I had 3 good meetings, and I kind of live in restaurants. It's a handicap of this job. Leaving a restaurant at 4 o'clock, I had an hour and a half to the next meeting. And clearly, the butterflies were not flying information at all. Went to my car and reviewed my notes, thought through the process, and then this brilliant idea came to me. Maybe I should be in prayer. Fascinating. I'm a pastor. Hello. So I prayed for the meeting that night. I prayed for the pastors. I prayed for the issues that I knew that I'm dealing with. And I thought, I should pray for our prayer team. So 5 couples, prayed through and said, Lord, get one of those crazy couples to open their computer. Hello. I need them. I don't know, prayed for them each individually and the issues in their own lives for several minutes. Went on to pray for some other things, looked at my watch, needed to get driving again. 20 minutes later I thought, isn't that interesting? The butterflies are all flying in formation. It was a wow in my own experience to just realize the power. So I'm simply telling you that this weekend there are 5 couples praying for you. It's an awesome privilege to work with leaders because every leader is crafted according to God's plan. When you realize that God gave you gifts before you were born, God gave gifts severally as He will. He knew what you had in mind. He knew what He wanted you to do, and He gave you the gifts, the talents, the abilities. Ministry leadership have a wonderful calling. I already told you, you're each leaders in your own right. Some of you influence a lot of people, some of you influence a few people, all of you influence a neighbor, for good or for bad. Matthew 20, 26 to 28. Whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant. One of my grandsons said to me 6 months ago, he saw a book on my living room couch. He said, Grandpa, tell me about your degree. I said, well, my second degree is in servant leadership. And we need to talk a little more. He says, why would you need a master's degree to lead servants? We need to talk more. Matthew 20, 28, 26, and 28. Whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant. A servant is not a doormat. As a CEO of the Alberta government, I had a responsibility to serve my board of directors. And I did have a board, and at this time I also have a board. I have a responsibility in this job to serve my board. I have a responsibility to serve the Lord. That's kind of an obvious one. I have a responsibility to serve 92 people who are on the ministry team. Ministry team, in my definition, is the pastors, the associate pastors, in all of our churches across 4 provinces. I have a responsibility to serve the 4,000 people who attend our services every weekend. I don't consider myself a doormat in the least, but I do believe I'm here to serve. I have a responsibility to serve each of you. I have a responsibility through all of us to serve our neighbors, to serve our community, to serve those people that I coach. It's a fascinating role. Whoever wants to be great among you must be your servant. Whoever wants to be first must be your slave. just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve. I have a challenging individual pastor that I'm working with right now. And he says, Laurie, the problem with my church is they haven't learned to do what they're told. Pastor, you have a responsibility to serve your people, to humble yourself. I said to one pastor one day, he had told me all about watch this, all about the awful people in his church. And these people and these people and those people, and I listened really, really well. And we were in his office and talking, and I said, help me. Did Christ die for them too? He said, yeah. I said, is John 3:16 still in your Bible? My sarcasm can really get in the way sometimes. He said, yeah, it is. But I said, Pastor, you just told me how wrong those people were. But Christ died for those people. Ladies and gentlemen, as leaders, you have a responsibility to serve. The challenge is many Christian leaders are acting more like their secular counterparts. James MacDonald, watch this, titled his article in Leadership Journal, I'm in charge here. He states Christian executives generally were more authoritative than their pagan counterparts, and they tend not to seek input from their subordinates as readily as do unbelieving leaders. Whoa. Are you an autocrat? Are you the kind of person who knows it all, and it's got to be your way? Or are you a servant to your friends, to your family, your neighbors? David Lundy in Servant Leadership says, many churches fail to grow because leadership is hoarded by the chosen few. Obviously, I did a fair amount of research on you guys. So remember, the things I'm saying to you may not be directly appropriate to each of you. But remember, your role is to be a servant leader. As a servant, you're serving your Heavenly Father, you're serving the people you work with. But leaders, in my opinion, we're at a decision point. We cannot lead by tradition and the way we've always done it, because it isn't working. I work with 38 churches. I love it. It is wonderful, but the most frustrating thing is, Laurie, we don't do it that way around here. Why not? And then they say, well, that's the way we do it here. Okay, is it working? Well, we've done it this way for years. I have one church that loves their VBS program. They just love it. And my question, so have we any results from this? Like, have kids been won to the Lord? No. Basically, it's the kids who come from that other church. Oh, it's a babysitting program. I love those. It's wonderful. Keep it up. But why aren't we leading people to the Lord? I'll tell you about dashboard stats Sunday morning. In terms of evaluating and looking at churches, looking at our programs, are they achieving the results? As leaders, are we accomplishing what God asked for? Haggai suggests, Haggai 1:3, we need to consider our ways. We need to consider how we live. We need to consider our relationships with each other. We need to consider relationships with our kids. Christ confirms no one can serve two masters. Hey, that's kind of obvious. I've been a change agent for 40 years. The most frustrating phone call that Shar would tell you about is I would come home from work and I'd say, honey, I got the phone call. She said, what phone call? I got the phone call. They said, Laurie, do we have a challenge for you? Yeah, extra $50 in the pay envelope, bigger office, more people, and bigger challenge. How many times have we moved? 24, 25, 26? Oh, do you know something that I don't? No man can serve two masters. You are responsible to your Heavenly Father. Christ said, Matthew 12:28, every kingdom, and I put parentheses in there, church, business, corporation, family, parentheses, divided against itself will be ruined. Do we have any conflict in Dunbar Heights? Can't leave that out there. Do we have any conflict? Do you have any people you just don't get along with? Do you have any challenges with people you need to settle? Do you have any people you need to make things right with? Because Christ confirms we cannot serve two masters. We need biblically based servant leaders who are effective. The sometimes leading, sometimes following indecision style that leads with control, or the guru of the month, simply doesn't work. Ephesians 4:11 and 12. Christ gave some apostles, some prophets, some evangelists, some pastors and teachers. Did you notice? Some pastors and teachers. And there's a comma, and it says, to equip his people for works of service. I love it when people come to me and say, well, pastor screwed up again. Or that phone call. And I don't hire pastors. You guys as a church hire the pastor. I'm simply there to advise. But I love that phone call. Laurie, that pastor you hired for us, he screwed up. Interesting. They don't phone and say, hey, Laurie, that guy you hired is wonderful. I had a phone call one day from, it was an email. It was a phone call. And he said, Laurie, you've got to come and work with that pastor you hired. I said, what happened? Oh, Laurie, it's awful. He's been here for 6 months. We now have kids coming to our church. And, oh, Laurie, they mess up the chairs Sunday morning. And they leave the Sunday school papers on the floor. Laurie, you've got to come down and fix him. I love my job. So I said to this elder, I said, as a servant leader, one, did you realize it's your job to straighten the chairs? Two, did you realize it's your job to serve those kids by picking up the Sunday school papers? Three, did you know that it's your job to serve your pastor? And four, your pastor's job is to equip the people for works of service. His role is not to do all the work. Your job is to do the work. His job is to lead, to guide, and direct. Servant leadership is alive and healthy in many church and business settings. These value-driven organizations recognize the individual gifts of their people. The service they provide is a priority and foremost in their thinking. Their vision, values, and policies are infused with servant leadership. They live, breathe, and duplicate themselves through loving and caring service. Do you love and care for your pastors? Do you love and care for your neighbors? Do you love and care for each other? Do you love and care for your employer? Well, maybe not. Yeah, you do. You need to love. I've been an employer most of my career. And 90% of the people I've worked with, I have thoroughly enjoyed it. It was a wonderful relationship. And honestly, sometimes I miss the secular world. I work with pastors all the time. Hello. Sorry. I miss the secular world because I rarely now work with unsaved people. I work with Christians all the time. And I miss people coming to me at coffee break and saying, you and Char do really well together. What's different about you guys? I miss that. Those of you who work in the secular world have a phenomenal opportunity. The book Prisoners of Hope, Dinah Curry and Heather Murphy were asked, but aren't you going to Afghanistan in a long day to try to convert people to Christianity? Isn't the work with the poor just a way to sneak into people's lives so you can preach to them? The response is typical of the servant leader. The word convert does not accurately reflect our intentions. It implies something vaguely manipulative, even dishonest. What we wanted to do was serve the Afghan people because we felt God had put a special love for them in our hearts. As a leader in your church, as a leader in your community, as a leader in your factory, as a leader in your shop floor, as your leader in driving your truck, as a leader in your university education, whatever it is you do, you have a responsibility to love. Or my favorite phrase, you need to demonstrate God's love. Do we always demonstrate God's love? I don't. By the way, I loved, no. Who drove us up here? There you are, I knew you were there. I was watching your speedometer, it was wonderful. I was driving to Unity, Saskatchewan, and I don't always demonstrate God's love. Hello, Pastor, give me a break. I was driving to Unity, Saskatchewan, which is normally a 5-hour drive. What are you covering your eyes for? Try to go like this. And I like to do it in 3 hours. It's an empty highway. I always drive rental vehicles, and because primarily it's cheaper for Fedcast and I get more miles per buck. And we're being recorded, aren't we? Brand new vehicle, rental, it's wonderful. I was alone, I was bored. I was doing 138 in 100. And that's not good. Like, they can take your car away. So I looked at the speedometer and I slowed down. I clearly slowed down. And I thought, oh, this is ridiculous. But, whoa, I'm still a little ways from Unity, and it's a long night, and I would prefer to get there so I could do some work. And so I kept on driving, and then I saw these red lights coming over this little hill, and I said, oh, freak. And so what did I do? There was not much I could do other than sort of get prepared. So she comes to my window, and I'm sitting waiting for her. And I said, you don't need to ask me that question about, do you know why I was stopping you? And she said, you know how fast we were going? Now that's an interesting question, because I did. So what do you do? So I said, well, 15 minutes ago I looked at my speedometer and I was doing 138. That was awful. But I know I slowed down from there. Go. So then she says, so where are you headed? I said, I'm going to Unity. And remember, I'm being as friendly as I can, for obvious reasons. The board doesn't cover speeding tickets. I do. And Shar says, it's coming out of your butt. Anyway, so she says, where are you going? I said, I'm going to Unity. She says, what are you doing in Unity? I'm preaching in the morning and doing a seminar in Vision in the afternoon. And then she said, you guys. And we're getting quite friendly by this point as she's standing there with her hand on her hip. And I said, what do you mean, you guys? I'm alone. Then she said something fascinating. She says, I pull more clergy on this highway with heavy right foot. $150 as I recall. And then I said to her, you reduced this, didn't you? I blew it. She then said, have you had that many tickets? You know what the rates are? I don't always demonstrate God's love. But my challenge to me and to you is we need to learn to demonstrate God's love. Leadership is service. The effective servant leader is consistent, is future-driven, is results-oriented, and has positive character skills. Effective leadership begins with each small, transformational step towards servant leadership. I like to remind elders and leadership boards that they are legally, ethically, and spiritually responsible for the church. I am shocked how many elders say to me, well, if they would get their act together. No, leader, if you would get your act together. And 3 points going to come on Monday. I almost gave them. Then it wouldn't have to start. Monday. Sunday.
Not
Sunday sermon. Leadership is committing to a life of service integrated with prayer. Look at your work. Look at your decisions. Are you serving? Leadership is defining and living on the right side of ethical issues. Tomorrow morning is ethics. The servant leader puts the needs of others ahead of personal needs. Oh, leaders, please understand that. Your role as a leader is putting the needs of others ahead of yourself. Do you know how often we argue for my own point? Because I'm right. Hey, I've been married for at least 30 years, hasn't it? Oh, 43. Has it been that long? Marriage is wonderful, but you don't always fit together perfectly. But if we could ever, ladies and gentlemen, figure it out, that our role is to put somebody else's needs ahead of ours. Leadership is not about you. It's about others. I want so badly to talk to one Canadian senator. We need to talk about others, not myself. Yes, I understand expense account. I understand the ease with which $5 can be spent on somebody else's expense account. I read an article years ago, it's one of the few that I should have photocopied, I didn't. And it said, the further you get from touching a dollar bill, shows you how old the article was, the less you value a dollar bill. And there's been some interesting social science research. If you give a quarter to a rich kid will say, so what's this? If you give a quarter to a poor kid, they'll say, wow. The further you are from touching a dollar bill, the less value you put on it. I'd love to work with our senators. I've worked with a lot of MLAs. I've worked with a number of MPs. We need to remember leadership is not about you, it's about others. Ladies and gentlemen, you are a leader. The key question is, what are your followers learning from you? Are they seeing Christ? An RCMP lady in Saskatchewan didn't see Christ when she wrote my ticket. And that's my fault. And that's my responsibility. Are people seeing Christ on the office floor? Are they seeing Christ through you on the shop floor? Are they seeing Christ through you in the university campus? Or are they seeing power and control? Or are they seeing you? And the frightening part about the research is, they're seeing us. And they're not seeing Christ. Yet if we buy John 3:16, and it's in my Bible, I hope it's in yours, Christ died for all those people. That neighbor who you don't like, Christ died for them. That relative of yours who irritates you, Christ died for them. Your spouse who manipulates you into buying a new pair of clothes. You're getting used to me over the next 2 days. You're getting used to us over the next 2 days. And believe me, Char's got the same stories. The frightening part about the research is the followers tend to see you. And that's my challenge for me, and it's a challenge for you. As a servant leader, we need to demonstrate God's love. Thank you.